I stared in disbelief at the massive green dumpster blocking my entire driveway. The stench of construction debris and concrete dust filled the air as I stood there, coffee mug in hand, trying to process what I was seeing. My pristine concrete driveway, the one I had just power washed last weekend, was now completely inaccessible thanks to this eyesore of industrial waste. I had received no warning, no note, not even a courtesy knock on the door. The dumpster was positioned diagonally, somehow managing to cover every square inch of my carefully laid pavement, from the garage door all the way to the street. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd spent 15 years of my life removing vehicles from places they shouldn't be, and now this monstrosity was blocking my own home. My morning routine was now completely derailed. I had an important meeting at 10 a.m. with a potential new client for my towing company, a contract that could significantly expand our business into the neighboring county. Now, I'd have to call an Uber or taxi just to get to my own office. I took a sip of my rapidly cooling coffee and exhaled slowly, watching the steam rise in the crisp morning air. Just as I was about to pull out my phone to call anyone, I noticed movement from the perfectly manicured lawn next door. There she was, Karen Winters, striding across her front yard in her crisp beige pantsuit, arms crossed over her chest, and a self-satisfied smile plastered across her face. I took a deep breath, reminding myself to stay calm. After all, there had to be some misunderstanding. "Good morning, Karen. There seems to be a problem here," I said, gesturing to the massive container. Karen's smile only grew wider as she approached, her highlighted blonde bob not moving an inch despite the morning breeze. "Oh, it's just temporary for my renovations," she replied with a dismissive wave of her manicured hand. The contractor needed somewhere to put it, and this was the most convenient spot. The way she said convenient made my blood boil, but I maintained my composure. "This is my driveway, Karen. I need to get my car out for work. You can't just place a dumpster here without asking me first." I pointed toward my garage, where my car was now effectively imprisoned. Karen adjusted her designer watch and glanced at it as if I was wasting her precious time. "Well, as the Homeowners Association president, I can assure you that we have policies about neighborhood improvements. My renovations will increase all of our property values." She gestured toward her house, where workers were already unloading expensive-looking marble countertops. "The community benefits from upgrades like mine. I would think you'd be more supportive." I bit my tongue to keep from saying something I might regret. This wasn't the first time Karen had thrown her title around like some sort of royal decree. Just last month, she'd organized a surprise inspection of everyone's backyard fencing without notifying half the neighborhood first. "Karen, I understand you're renovating, but that doesn't give you the right to block my driveway. I need access to my garage." I tried to keep my voice even, professional, the same tone I used with difficult clients at work. She sighed dramatically while checking her immaculately polished nails. "The placement is only for 3 weeks. Surely you can make accommodations. My contractor says moving it now would delay the entire project schedule." She spoke as if her renovation timeline was somehow my responsibility. What she didn't know, what she couldn't possibly have known, was that I wasn't just any neighbor she could bulldoze over. I owned Reliable Towing, the largest towing company in the county. We specialized in heavy equipment removal and had contracts with the city and 3 neighboring townships. And while I preferred to keep my work and home life separate, Karen was about to learn a valuable lesson about respecting other people's property. I had moved into Oakwood Estates just 8 months ago after years of saving every penny from my towing business, started with just 1 truck 15 years ago. Sleeping in my office on a pull-out couch, taking every call that came in day or night, I slowly built my fleet to 23 vehicles and a staff of 35. The company had become successful enough that I could finally afford my dream home, a beautiful 2-story colonial with a spacious yard in a neighborhood with tree-lined streets and a strong sense of community. Oakwood Estates represented everything I had worked for: peaceful streets, well-maintained homes, and a community that prided itself on being respectful and tight-knit. At least, that was what the real estate agent had promised. The brochure had shown smiling neighbors having barbecues together and children riding bicycles down safe, quiet streets. The Homeowners Association was described as a dedicated group ensuring property values remained high while fostering community spirit. I had been excited about belonging somewhere after years of 60-hour work weeks. Reality had proven somewhat different, primarily because the self-appointed queen of the Homeowners Association, Karen, had made it her personal mission to welcome me by immediately pointing out every perceived flaw in my property. Within 48 hours of moving in, I found a neatly typed notice attached to my door with a remarkably comprehensive list of violations. My mailbox was apparently the wrong shade of hunter green. Forest green is the only approved dark green tone per Section 12, Paragraph 4. My lawn, despite weekly mowing, was apparently a quarter of an inch too high on Tuesdays. Grass must never exceed 2¼ inches in height at any time. The bird feeder in my backyard was non-regulation and could attract unwanted wildlife. Even the welcome mat I had placed at my front door was deemed excessive in size and inappropriate in design. For you, a free like is easy. But for me, it is the greatest support and encouragement. For this video, can you give me 1 like and 1 subscription? Thank you very much. At first, I had thought she was just being thorough, perhaps even helpful in her own misguided way. I made the changes, painted the mailbox, purchased a Homeowners Association approved bird feeder, and replaced my welcome mat with something more subdued. I attended the monthly meetings, introduced myself to neighbors, and tried to integrate into the community I had envisioned. Some neighbors were genuinely friendly, privately rolling their eyes at Karen's obsession with rules while being careful not to openly challenge her authority. I had tried to be understanding, to play by the rules, and maintain the peace, but this dumpster situation was a step too far. Karen had begun a full home renovation 2 weeks ago, transforming her already immaculate colonial into something even more grandiose. From what I could gather, she was adding a sunroom, expanding her kitchen, and completely overhauling her master bathroom with imported Italian marble. The constant noise was one thing, I could live with that. But having her contractor park a dumpster in my driveway without so much as a courtesy call was beyond inconsiderate. Karen, I understand you're renovating, but you need to have this moved immediately. I can't access my car, I explained again, pointing to my garage where my sedan was now effectively trapped. Karen sighed dramatically, as if I was being completely unreasonable. The contractor already paid for the placement. It would cost extra to move it now. Surely you can park on the street for a few days. We all have to make sacrifices for the betterment of the neighborhood. Her condescending tone made my jaw clench, but I remained outwardly calm. This isn't a public space, this is my private property. I need this dumpster moved today. I gestured to the property line markers that were clearly visible at the edges of my lawn, markers I had specifically asked the surveyor to make prominent after Karen had accused me of encroaching on common area with my garden beds last month. Karen's fake smile finally faltered, replaced by a look of annoyance. She pulled out her phone and tapped through several screens before holding it up to show me a document with the Homeowners Association letterhead. I've already cleared this with the Homeowners Association board. We approved it yesterday. She zoomed in on a signature at the bottom that appeared to be from Gerald Weber, the vice president. The board understands the importance of allowing improvements to proceed efficiently. I studied the document, noting that while it authorized a dumpster for Karen's renovation, it said nothing about placement on a neighbor's property. I knew this was a manipulation. I had received no notice, and nothing in the bylaws allowed for this kind of encroachment. That document doesn't specify my driveway as the location. I'll be calling Gerald and the rest of the board to verify that they intended to grant permission for you to block my private property, I replied, turning to walk back inside. My phone was already in my hand as I pulled up Gerald's contact information. Karen's voice followed me, dripping with false sweetness. You know, as a new resident, it's really in your best interest to be cooperative with neighborhood initiatives. The board tends to remember who works with the community and who creates problems. The thinly veiled threat wasn't lost on me. I dealt with enough difficult customers and city officials over the years to recognize an intimidation tactic when I heard one. I paused at my front door, turning slightly. "Is that a threat, Karen? Because I'd be happy to discuss your interpretation of the bylaws at the next open meeting. I'm sure all the neighbors would be interested in hearing how the rules apply differently to different residents." Her expression flickered momentarily, surprised perhaps that I wasn't backing down, before settling back into that practiced smile. "Not at all. Just some friendly advice from someone who wants to see you succeed here in Oakwood Estates." I nodded politely and continued inside, already drafting the email I would send to the entire board with photos of my blocked driveway attached. I might be new to the neighborhood, but I was far from naive when it came to dealing with people who abused their authority. The following days became increasingly frustrating. The dumpster remained stubbornly in place, forcing me to park on the street and walk an extra block to my house. This wouldn't have been such an issue if it weren't for the unexpected torrential downpour on the second day, which left me drenched in my business suit before an important client meeting. My carefully polished shoes were ruined, squelching with muddy water as I walked into the conference room. Delivery drivers couldn't reach my door, leaving packages at the curb, where one got soaked in an unexpected rain shower. A rare first edition book I'd been hunting for years, now warped beyond repair despite the seller's careful packaging. The courier had left an apologetic note explaining he couldn't access my porch due to the construction equipment and had been forced to leave it by the mailbox instead. Each morning, I would find Karen coincidentally checking her mail or watering her already drenched flowers whenever I left for work, that smug smile growing more irritating by the day. Once, I caught her actually taking photos of my car parked on the street, presumably to document some imagined violation of street parking rules. When she saw me watching, she simply waved with that plastic smile and continued her documentation. I called my friend Tom, who served on the homeowners association board in his own neighborhood across town. "This can't be legal," he assured me after hearing my situation. "Check your bylaws. There should be specific language about easements and property access." Armed with this advice, I spent an evening poring over the 64-page Homeowners Association covenant I had received upon purchase. There it was, in black and white, Section 17.3, "No homeowner or contractor may impede access to another resident's property without express written consent." I contacted the Homeowners Association directly the following morning, email copied to all 5 board members with photos attached and the relevant bylaw section highlighted. Their response was disappointingly evasive. After a series of back and forth messages, I discovered that Karen had indeed pushed through some vague approval by citing a different bylaw about temporary storage solutions during approved renovations. The fact that the storage solution was on my property seemed to be a conveniently overlooked detail. Gerald Weber, the vice president whose signature appeared on the approval, finally called me directly. "Look," he said in a hushed tone that suggested he didn't want to be overheard, "we all know Karen can be difficult, but she's been president for 6 years, and she knows how to make life uncomfortable for those who cross her. Remember the Johnsons on Maple Court? They challenged her garden statute regulations and suddenly found themselves facing weekly compliance checks for a year." He cleared his throat awkwardly. "The board recommends you work it out neighbor to neighbor." Translation: they were too afraid of Karen to enforce their own rules. By the 5th day, when I found fresh concrete splatter on my driveway from workers tossing debris into the dumpster without any regard for my property, my patience had officially run out. I took detailed photos of the damage, documenting each splash of cement that had now hardened on my pavement. One particularly large splash had even reached my garage door, leaving a crust-high white streak across the dark green paint, a paint color that had ironically been specifically approved by Karen herself during my move-in. This wasn't just about inconvenience anymore, it was about respect and property rights. I've built my business on understanding the fine line between public and private property. I knew exactly what my rights were, regardless of what the homeowners association claimed, and I knew precisely how to enforce them. That evening, as I watched Karen hosting what appeared to be a small gathering on her patio, no doubt showing off her renovation plans to her equally entitled friends. I made a decision. I had been playing by Karen's rules, trying to be the bigger person, but sometimes you need to remind people that actions have consequences. With a surprising sense of calm, I walked into my home office and picked up my phone. I didn't call the homeowners association, I didn't call the city. Instead, I called my dispatcher, Mike, who had been with my company for over a decade. "Hey, Mike, I need the heavy-duty rig at my address within the hour. Bring Jason. We've got an oversized dumpster to relocate." Mike didn't ask questions. That's why he was my best employee. "On it, boss. We'll be there in 45. I stepped back outside, leaned against my porch railing, and waited. From her patio, I could see Karen watching me, that self-satisfied grin still in place. She had no idea what was coming. Exactly 42 minutes later, the distinctive rumble of a heavy-duty tow truck turned onto our street. The massive vehicle, emblazoned with the Reliable Towing logo and phone number, slowly made its way toward my house, hydraulic arms glistening in the early evening sunlight. Jason, my most experienced driver, stepped out of the truck and approached me with a respectful nod. "Evening, boss. This the situation?" he asked, gesturing to the dumpster. "For you, a free like is easy. But for me, it is the greatest support and encouragement. For this video, can you give me 1 like and 1 subscription? Thank you very much." I nodded, handing him the clipboard I had prepared with the necessary paperwork: unauthorized placement on private property, standard removal procedure. Jason assessed the dumpster quickly, already planning the technical aspects of the lift. From the corner of my eye, I could see Karen's gathering had stopped. She was now hurrying across her lawn, her heels sinking slightly into the perfectly manicured grass. "What do you think you're doing?" she demanded, her voice pitched higher than usual. I turned to face her calmly. "Having an unauthorized object removed from my property, Karen." Her face flushed red as she watched Jason begin preparing the equipment. "You can't touch that. It's homeowners association approved property," she nearly shrieked, pulling out her phone. "I'm calling the police." That's when I decided it was time to reveal what she should have researched before deciding to make an enemy of me. "Karen, let me introduce myself properly. I'm not just your neighbor, I'm the owner of Reliable Towing, and I have every legal right to remove anything obstructing my private driveway." I handed her my business card, watching as the realization slowly dawned on her face. This dumpster is illegally placed, regardless of whatever homeowners association approval you claim to have. No one can authorize the use of my private property without my consent. The color drained from Karen's face as Jason efficiently connected the hydraulic system to the dumpster. The heavy machinery hummed powerfully as the arms positioned themselves. "Stop this right now," Karen demanded, though her voice had lost some of its earlier confidence. A small crowd of neighbors had gathered now, watching the spectacle unfold from a respectful distance. "I'm afraid I can't do that," I replied calmly. "The dumpster is being relocated to the municipal storage yard. Your contractor can retrieve it there, after paying the standard removal and storage fees, of course." The hydraulic system hissed as the dumpster was slowly lifted, debris shifting inside with a satisfying rumble. Karen's renovation waste, bold cabinet pieces, broken tile, and what looked like parts of a bathroom vanity, was now being hauled away before her very eyes. Her contractor would not be pleased. As the dumpster cleared my driveway, revealing the concrete stains beneath, Karen seemed to finally understand the magnitude of her miscalculation. She had chosen the wrong neighbor to bully. "This is an abuse of power. You can't do this," she sputtered, already dialing another number on her phone. "You're welcome to call whoever you'd like," I said, my voice steady as I watched Jason secure the load. "But I should warn you, the city ordinances, state laws, and yes, even the homeowners association bylaws all protect homeowners from unauthorized use of their private property. Page 17, Section 4 of our covenant specifically states that driveways are considered exclusive use areas." I had done my homework, something Karen clearly hadn't expected. As the tow truck pulled away with the dumpster, Karen was left standing on my now cleared driveway, phone in hand, mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. "You'll be hearing from my lawyer," she finally managed to say, though her threat sounded hollow even to my ears. "I look forward to it," I replied with a polite nod. "In the meantime, please ensure any future renovation equipment stays on your property." With that, I turned and walked back into my house, feeling the stares of my neighbors and the simmering rage of Karen behind me. For the first time since moving in, I felt like I had claimed my place in the neighborhood. Karen's tantrum escalated exactly as I had anticipated. By the following morning, my phone was buzzing with messages, not just from Karen, who had left several incoherent voicemails threatening legal action, but also from the Homeowners Association board requesting an emergency meeting. I attended calmly, documentation in hand. The boardroom in the community center was tense as Karen dramatically recounted how I had stolen her dumpster and sabotaged her renovation. When it was my turn to speak, I simply presented the facts: photographic evidence of the dumpster blocking my entire driveway, copies of city ordinances prohibiting blockage of private accessways, and most damning of all, the section of the Homeowners Association's own bylaws that clearly protected homeowners' rights to their driveways. While I respect the authority of this board, I concluded, no vote or approval can override city law or property rights. The dumpster was removed legally and with proper documentation. The board members exchanged uncomfortable glances. They knew I was right, even if none of them wanted to be the one to tell Karen. Finally, the vice president cleared his throat. It appears the approval was given without proper consideration of placement. The bylaws do indeed protect private driveways from unauthorized. Karen's face contorted with rage as she realized her position was crumbling. This is ridiculous. His driveway was the only logical place for the dumpster. The room fell silent at this admission that she had knowingly placed it there despite alternatives. The consequences unfolded rapidly. Karen's contractor arrived at the board meeting, furious about having to pay the towing and storage fees to retrieve his dumpster. When he learned that Karen had assured him the placement was approved without actually securing proper permission, he threatened to place a lien on her property for the added expenses and delays. The renovation work halted immediately. The contractor was cited by the city for unauthorized placement of equipment, adding another fine to the growing list of costs. Karen's renovation timeline was now pushed back indefinitely as she scrambled to find a new contractor willing to work with her. As for me, I returned home from the meeting with a strange mix of satisfaction and exhaustion. I hadn't wanted to make waves in my new neighborhood, but I also couldn't allow myself to be bullied in the place I had worked so hard to call home. That evening, several neighbors stopped by, not to complain, but to quietly thank me for standing up to Karen. Apparently, her reign of Homeowners Association terror had affected more households than just mine. "About time someone put her in her place," one elderly gentleman confided. "She's had the board wrapped around her finger for years." A week later, a new notice appeared in all residents' mailboxes. The Homeowners Association had issued a revised policy specifically banning the placement of dumpsters, construction equipment, or any temporary structures on private property without express written approval from the affected homeowner. The document included a standardized form for contractors to submit, requiring signatures from both the homeowner initiating construction and any neighbors whose property might be affected. The policy outlined clear consequences for violations, including immediate removal at the offender's expense and potential fines. The board members had unanimously approved this addition, with Karen notably absent from the vote. For you, a free like is easy. But for me, it is the greatest support and encouragement. For this video, can you give me 1 like and 1 subscription? Thank you very much. Gerald Weber personally delivered my copy, explaining with a slightly embarrassed smile that the board had conducted a thorough review of all bylaws after the recent incident. He admitted that many of their policies had ambiguities that could be exploited by those with a certain interpretation of the rules, and they were working to address these gaps. "We should have done this years ago," he confessed, shaking my hand firmly. Sometimes it takes someone willing to stand their ground to initiate positive change. My business saw an unexpected benefit as well. Word spread quickly through the neighborhood and beyond about the towing company owner who stood up to the homeowners association tyrant. The story had gained enough traction that even residents from surrounding communities had heard some version of it. Several new customers mentioned it when calling for service, chuckling as they explained how they'd heard about reliable towing through the Great Dumpster Showdown. Several residents from Oakwood Estates contacted Reliable Towing for legitimate services, a jump start here, a tow after a breakdown there. Mrs. Abernathy, the sweet elderly woman 3 doors down who always brought cookies to new neighbors, called us when her grandson's car got stuck in a muddy patch of her backyard. I sent Jason personally with instructions not to charge her, a neighborhood courtesy that resulted in even more goodwill and referrals. Perhaps most surprisingly, the Homeowners Association itself contracted us as their official towing provider for violations in common areas. Gerald explained that they had previously used a company from nearly 30 miles away because of long-standing relationships, but the board had voted to support local businesses going forward. The irony wasn't lost on me as I signed the annual contract that would bring in a steady stream of legitimate removal jobs from the very organization that had tacitly approved the invasion of my property. As for Karen, the change in her behavior was subtle but unmistakable. Her renovation eventually resumed with a new contractor. Her previous one had apparently failed to meet expectations, and a properly placed dumpster on her own property, positioned carefully on her side lawn where it blocked only her garden path rather than anyone else's access. The new contractor, I noticed, was meticulous about containing debris and even pressure washed the street at the end of each workday. Karen still carried herself with the same air of superiority at homeowners association meetings, still nitpicked other neighbors about their mailboxes and lawn ornaments. She still sent out her monthly neighborhood violation report, though I noticed my name had mysteriously disappeared from the distribution list. But one thing changed significantly. She now parked 3 houses down and walked past my property rather than drive by my driveway, even when carrying groceries or during rainstorms. She would park her luxury SUV well away from my house and make the journey on foot, her designer heels clicking rapidly on the sidewalk as she hurried past. Every time I noticed this small victory, I couldn't help but smile to myself. I never mentioned it, never called attention to it. There was no need. We both knew what had happened, and we both understood the new boundary that had been established. Sometimes the most effective lessons come from unexpected teachers, and sometimes those teachers own towing companies.